And so I think this morning I better talk about the silence lesson. I hope I do it justice. I haven't really been thinking about it, which is another exercise that we do with the little children in the Montessori classroom. Now, it is quite interesting historically the way this lesson grew up. First of all, when Maria Montessori was working with the partially deaf children, she devised many exercises for making them really listen. The more these children will listen, if they have hearing at all, the hearing will improve through use. You see? That is why a partially deaf child does so well amongst the normal children in a Montessori classroom, because naturally he or she wants to join in with the normal children and makes a great effort to listen and answer because they want to socialize. Whereas the same child with his mother at home may hardly talk or not talk at all. We have found children who would begin to talk, being thought to be totally deaf, would begin to talk in a Montessori classroom simply because it was a happy environment and there were the other children. You always want to socialize with people of your own age, and then they would improve. Very hard to test hearing of little children. Well, when we've done that, every time the testing is usually done about every 6 months, every time the hearing has improved. You see. Well, with Maria Montessori, she had this class of partially deaf children, and one thing that she used to do was to stand behind the group so that they couldn't see her lips moving, they couldn't possibly lip read, and she would call their names one by one. And she would, for a very deaf child, she would call the name a little louder, and for a child, so that she adjusted her voice so that the child could only had really to listen and could only just hear his name called. And when she called the name, then the child would get up and come to her. And at first she always had a little reward ready for them, like a sweet. And then she found the children liked the exercise so much they forgot about the sweets and didn't even bother to take them. So this is where she first began to realize that children didn't work for rewards, and it was really better not to bring that element in. When she was teaching the normal children, of course she was continuing her work with the other children, but one day she was going in to see the children, and in the courtyard she met a mother with a very new baby. Now, babies in those days in Italy were strapped to a board, in swaddling clothes. And this baby was only a few days old, and she took it in to show it to the children. And the children, you know how they love to see a new baby, and she talked about it. And then, just for fun, she said to the children, "Oh, how quiet this baby is. None of you could keep as quiet as this." And the children took her very seriously. And they all sat down and started to be really silent and quiet. You see? And then she said, "Oh, you're still not as quiet as the baby. I can hear a foot moving." You see? And then they were quiet. "Oh, you're still not as quiet as the baby. I can hear some of you breathing." Because, a baby that makes no sound at all, it breathes so softly. And the children just loved this. And when she went back to visit them again, they wanted to do it again. You see? Because they always want to repeat whatever they have enjoyed. So she found herself doing this exercise with them. And she found that the children began to realize that movement was caused by noise. They began to move much more quietly and therefore more gracefully about the room. And they began to get up and sit down without shuffling their chairs and tables. So then she combined this exercise with the exercise that she did with the deaf children. She would stand behind the room, you see, and she usually slightly darkened the room And then she called every child's name in such a soft voice, not a whisper, but a very, very soft voice, so that the child could barely hear the name. So that everybody had to listen very acutely to hear their name. And as soon as their name was called, they got up and went as quietly as ever they could to stand by her. She did see the children were sitting comfortably before the game began, you see, and she always saw that everybody was called. Remember, there were about 70 children. It wasn't a small class. But nobody liked it if someone else was there, if she stopped halfway, or if the child had been waiting for his name if there wasn't time to call it. So they would come and stand by her, and she felt it was also a spiritual exercise. The silence, there's a spiritual element, and it was like a meditation, and the children were very relaxed and happy, and at their best afterwards. Being a Catholic, she also felt it was a preparation for them attending church and being quiet in the church. Because in all Catholic countries, the children have free access to the church. It's one of the things that is the nicest things about it. They wander in and out of the church as they like. I remember being at High Mass at Burgos Cathedral, which was a wonderful celebration with all of gold and diamonds and wonderful vestments. And two little boys came in from the street, barefooted, very ragged little boys. And they were so small they couldn't reach the holy water. So one held the other one up and had a dip into the crossing, and then the other one got held up and he got his dip and crossed himself. And then they wandered up through the people until they got right up to the altar, and they were spellbound, of course. This very elaborate service is really wonderful to look at. And then they crept between the altar rails. Nobody took any notice of them. They got right under the priest's feet, and the priest just went round them. And yes, it was amazing. But that is Spain, you see, and the children are welcome anywhere, you see. And to me, it was a real revelation as to the way to look at children. So you did see the children just joining in anywhere. And they always went to the services. They were not as in Europe, where we didn't go until we were a certain age. This is changing. You see babies in prams down the aisles now. So she felt it was also a preparation for, behaving well at the Mass. Now the children, it's a spiritual exercise as well. Now the children did like it so much that after a time she thought that they ought to be able to have this exercise whenever they felt like it. And so she had the word silence very beautifully written on a card that hung on the wall, and it hung with its face to the wall. And if a child felt, or the children felt like the silence lesson, somebody got up and turned the card over so that instead of having the blank side showing, it said silence. And I first saw this happen in a class of about 60 in a very poor London public school, which ran on the Montessori method. Somebody turned the card over, and a few children noticed and immediately put everything down and were quiet. And then these few being quiet, the other ones round them felt this quietness, and they were quiet. And in a very short time, this silence had spread all round the room. It was like a ripple in a pond, you see. It was very impressive. And then the teacher stood behind the class and called the children. And I say 2 children fell asleep. there were these children, and at that time they wore very heavy boots, the boys, these with nails in them so they wouldn't wear out. And it was amazing to see these little boys trying to walk quietly in these very heavy hobnailed boots and managing to. The children were very serious about it, really about it. So that is the way it's done. And I think generally now, after the first introductions, when you have to have this introduction and a little bit get the children to understand how you keep quiet. I can hear somebody's foot moving. I can hear a hand moving. And as a variation, they do also like sometimes to sit absolutely still and quiet and just listen. And when you sit absolutely silently in a classroom, you can hear all sorts of other things happening. You can hear very tiny sounds. You can often hear the clock ticking or a little insect buzzing. You hear the sounds that you would never be aware of normally. And you see, children who are just interested in everything are really fascinated by silence. And again, but you cannot have the silence lesson until you have had your class for a little while. They have to have cohesed as a group. That is, every child has to be able to subordinate his own wishes to the good of the majority. So that even if he would rather go on writing or whatever he's doing, he's willing, because everybody else wants a silence lesson, he's willing to be silent too. And then the children have had a certain number of the exercises for the control of movement, like carrying a chair without making any noise, or this walking on the line exercise. So they do understand how to become quiet, you see, because that isn't so easy for them. And they have to know the teacher very well and want to do what she likes, you see. They have to be able to obey. When you get a really good silence lesson, it is really a proof of these children who have cohesed as a society, which Dr. Montessori talks about this society by cohesion. They have really become members of a group. They're really fond of each other. They're really upset if anything goes wrong with anybody else. They're upset if a child is way ill, you see, or if a child hurts itself. And they have become the sort of society that's very good and kind to everybody else. And so it's possibly it takes a little while before your children are ready to act in that way. Now, it's never used for a utilitarian purpose. I always remember in one examination the teacher wrote, "It's an excellent time to mark your register." But that was just imposing silence. This is something quite different. So you would lead up to it. When you felt your group was ready, you see, you could have it, play it one day, and if your group enjoyed it, then you would have the placard on the wall and call the names, but you always have to call everybody. And the others are so good at standing quietly while you do that. And when the group just breaks up, you just smile at everybody and you naturally break up and don't even have to say anything. Other times you can sit silently and listen to whatever's happening. You sometimes do that at rest time. If everybody lies very quietly to listen to all the tiny sounds. I'll tell you afterwards what they've heard. Because here we would hear plenty of big sounds with all the traffic going by. All right then, you want to ask anything about that?
Is the purpose for doing this like putting the sign on the wall to let children let them to be like a part of the class and then to unite them as together as a classroom?
Yes, when they are united, when they can act like that, this is independence. It's like choosing your own work, isn't it?
How long?
But the marvelous thing is how this silence spreads across the room. One or two notice it, then next ones begin to sit still, and then in a matter of seconds the whole room is absolutely quiet.
How long did you, how length of time?
Well, it depends on how many children you've got. You see? If you have a big class, it does take quite a long time.
Do you find like students like do this maybe like 2 or 3 times a day, and like they end up being silent most of the day? Like one student will go turn the sign around and do the silence part, and then we'll break up, and then like maybe a half hour later somebody else will do it.
I've never known that happen. No, I don't think the children really feel like they are very quiet and peaceful afterwards. But you mustn't use it just because you've got a noisy morning. You see. Dr. Montessori always said it was also a religious exercise.
And when you first introduce it, do you introduce the word itself? How do you actually lead into it?
You lead into it by having an exercise with the children in which you're all going to sit absolutely still and without moving.
And you tell that to them?
Yes, you tell them that, you see. Now we'll listen. And then you don't say anything to any particular child. It's like, you can shut your eyes if you like, you know. That I can hear somebody's feet moving. I can hear somebody doing something with a pencil.
You've never had anything with children giggling or laughing or things like that?
And no, they take it very seriously. It depends on your relationship with the children. If you're very serious about it, you know they are.
Is this something you wouldn't use until your group had cohees, as you were saying?
No, you can't use it until your group has a cohesive as a group, until your children have become obedient, until they respond to you as a teacher. You see. Yes, now that is essential. And you can't use it for extraneous purposes. You can't use it because, I'm having a terrible day today, I want to quiet the children down. Well, I have heard it. I was in a Montessori school, and the teacher turned the silence notice round herself, and when all the children had made the silence, she said, I just want to tell you, you're being very noisy this morning. You see? Well, it's not. I mean, that's killing the purpose. It's not. She was using it in a completely wrong way. Almost misleading the children who were expecting the lesson. So you must use things for that proper purpose. Wouldn't matter. Wouldn't matter at all. You don't have to worry about those things. He's going to be quiet, and that's all that matters. I mean, some will be working on the floor, some will be working at tables. They just are very quiet wherever they are.
Can they continue working if they can work quietly?
No, that's why I say they have to be cohesive as a group. They have to be in that social stage where they will subordinate their own wishes to the wishes of the group. So if it's a silence lesson, everybody stops working. If they went on working, they would be noisy. You would hear all sorts of sounds of them putting the pink tile together. So it's necessary that everybody joins in. So you can't do it for a little while. You see. But when your children are able to do that, then they really have gone. You've overcome all discipline problems, haven't you? You've got a very happy group.
Are there any other meditative exercises that are included?
Well, forms of meditation, I think, are all being very quiet and listening to certain types of music. We often do. You see, in England, if you have your children all day, they all have a half-hour rest with a rug and pillow after dinner. And you do things like that. You could get them listen to some very beautiful music. You see. And we have such a wonderful lot of church music, very beautiful music. And we're just going, in all our cathedrals, there are just libraries and libraries of music from nearly 2,000 years of music. And we are going back and making wonderful records of all the early music. We had wonderful programs this Christmas of church music down. I wasn't able to tape the first because there was a strike, unfortunately. The only piece I could take was Palestrina. But a lot of it's anonymous. And you know, you have such a wealth to choose from. And this music makes you feel in a meditative frame of mind. Or you can read them beautiful poetry, which again, you see, does the same thing as music. But do, when you read them poetry, read them the poetry of the great poets. And don't worry whether they understand it or not. I mean, because my father read poetry, he would just read aloud to us, so he sat on his knee, you know. And I was very old before I even realized it was meant to mean anything, you know. But it was just, you loved it just for the sound of it. So you can read them any but great poetry. And just as with music, the more you listen to music, you don't understand the sonata the first time. But when you've listened many times, then you begin to understand. So with poetry, you listen to it. And then later, you know, you get the meaning. It doesn't matter. You don't have to read it in your own language. So you can read it any language you know. You can read the poetry of that country in the language of that country.
How would you help a child new to the school who hasn't really fit in yet to this cohesive society that you have? You say a child who is a student who's been there before, turns the sign over, and it's like the second or third day that this child who's really not, he's going to have problems, and you know it.
Well, you take him, but I would take him by me. Surely in 2 or 3 days you made a good relationship with a new child, hopefully before school began. You see, I would, in a very soft voice, explain to him how we were going to be so still and quiet. Here's a little chair for you by me. You sit with me and we'll see how quiet we can be. He will enjoy it as much as anyone else.
Is the sign kept in the room for the rest of the year once it's introduced?
Yes, I do, but it's your classroom. Hang it all. You're free to do what you like in your own classroom. I certainly would keep it there.
Is it possible a child emotionally or psychologically would be unable to do this?
If there was a child who was a really badly psychologically disturbed child, who didn't, all the other children would understand, they wouldn't hold it against him. They would just carry on with the exercise. See?
Have you seen such a child? Is this...
Usually, the teacher would go down and sit with him or have him beside her. And if you hold his hand or put a hand on him, he'll usually calm down and be as good as the next man. Because remember that these psychologically, emotionally disturbed children are wanting to be acceptable members of the group. They want that as much as any other child. People are group animals. We're none of us happy unless we are accepted by our peers. And one way you help these children is by getting their peers to accept them. And you can do this consciously. You can say, now William hasn't learned to behave well yet, so we're going to help him. Perhaps you, James, would let him sit at your table today. And the children do more helping the child than you do. But you have to have this good attitude to everyone. And if this child has made a relationship with any other child, you could whisper to him, you sit by James and he'll show you what we do. So it's up to you to find ways around it. As long as you are really kind to these children who can't yet fit in. If you are, then all the other children will be too. So I think you all see children as problems. You know, you've got to begin seeing them from the opposite point of view. They're not really problems. You know, if you really and truly, if you've got to learn to smile at them, you've got to learn to be pleased to see them in the morning. You know, and be a little warm towards them. Because anyone who is a problem has had a very bad experience in life, and school has to give him a second chance. You're not a problem for nothing, and you don't like being a problem. You don't know how not to be, so. And really, the most interesting part of a Montessori class is the fact that you get a lot of problem children brought to you who have failed everywhere else. And the interesting thing is, you know, that really very quickly you can get them cured. That's the most satisfying part of it. Well, now, we've got to do this evaluation. Who is it? The students will look after.